Good morning. Or no, I think it's the afternoon when you're looking at this. And I'm ready to teach you more about the Cuban Missile Crisis. All right, so this is where we stopped off yesterday. Remember, the Soviets hate the Americans hate the Soviets, and everyone's got massive nuclear weapons. Mutually assured destruction would happen if this war happened. Cuba, if there were a bridge between Cuba and the United States, it would take about an hour and a half to drive there. So Cuba's really, really close to the United States. And the Soviets are now sending nuclear weapons to their buddy Cuba. Sorry, I'm coughing. What was going on in Khrushchev's mind? This is where we left off yesterday. Previously, he had promised Kennedy to not use Cuba as a threat. Why is he doing it now? Well, NATO had nuclear missiles in Turkey, which is very, very close to the Soviet Union. And Khrushchev was like, I want America to see what it feels like. Also, Khrushchev was looking really bad in the Soviet public's eyes because of his fencing in Eastern Berlin. It was so miserable there. He had to imprison the people. Looks really bad for a leader. He wanted to do something that was really cool, that would make him look cool and make the people like him again. So he was like, if I can slip nuclear weapons really, really close to America, I'll win my people's respect again. Also, they feared the Americans would attack Cuba again. And if the communists lost to America, horribly, terribly bad. All these things were going on in Khrushchev's mind. What was going on in Kennedy's head? Remember, Kennedy, President of the United States of America at this time. He thought if the nuclear threat so close to America was going to really, really hurt the national pride of Americans. You know, we talked about it yesterday, these people that are flying their flags around and wrapping themselves in the American flag because God bless America. Those people would be really upset if they knew there were nuclear weapons at their doorstep. Also, politician's gonna politician, the elections were coming up soon, and Kennedy knew that having these nuclear weapons so close would hurt his party. He also thought, if I let Khrushchev push me around on this, he's going to get even harsher on Eastern Germany. He didn't want things to go bad in Eastern Germany. He wanted things to be going more toward the West in Eastern Germany. So Kennedy's like, oh, what should I do? Should I invade Cuba? Should I drop bombs on Cuba? Should I just sink the Soviet ships as they're coming? These are the things that were going on in Khrushchev's head and Kennedy's head right at the beginning. All right, now we are at the real Cuban Missile Crisis. It was 13 days long, October 16th to 28th through 1962. My parents were 10 years old in 1962, so this really is not that long ago. On October 16th, Kennedy called together a group of trusted politicians and people from the military and such, called it an executive committee. But everybody wants to have a nickname, so they don't really call it the executive committee, they call it XCOM. And XCOM was meeting to discuss what in the world should we do about this. there is now a real threat of nuclear war. What are we going to do? They met every single day for 13 days. 6 days later, so about halfway through, on October 22nd, Kennedy decided he was not going to launch an attack. Not going to happen. We're not going to have an attack. What we're going to do is we're going to set up a naval quarantine. A naval quarantine is when, so like ships are coming through the ocean like this from the Soviet Union. The United States was going to set up ships like this so they couldn't get past. But this is important to note. Any of you who actually know war strategy would call this a blockade. We're blocking the ships. It's a blockade. But a blockade is considered an act of war. And Kennedy did not want to start a war with Khrushchev, mutually assured destruction. Don't want to do that. So instead, he simply used different words. He called it a naval quarantine. And when he called it a naval quarantine, it wasn't an act of war. Okay, so they said through this naval quarantine, only ships they approved of would get through. On that same day, October 22nd, Kennedy went live on national television to the United States public to tell them about the nuclear missiles in Cuba. The people were shocked. Like, this is the United States of America we're talking about. And there were nuclear weapons close enough to hit every major city in the United States. People were terrified. Everyone expected a nuclear war. Because of this, because of the sheer terror of all the people, Kennedy prepared in case there actually was a war. He prepared 54 bombers, each of them with 4 nuclear warheads. So that's 54 times 4. All those nuclear warheads, they were ready to go. The world. This was like headline news all around the world. The entire world was like tense and just waiting for a nuclear war to start. The next 2 days, October 23rd and 24th, Khrushchev did some self-reflection and realized he really did not want war either. And he ordered the ships to turn around. Now, I already mentioned this before. The book, your book, it only mentions ships, but there were also submarines. There were submarines coming. So submarines, you know, under the water. So he ordered the ships and the submarines to turn around, but he didn't tell Kennedy that. Kennedy did not know, and he thought the ships were still coming. And he kept his quarantine, not blockade, quarantine in place. On the 24th, when Kennedy finds out that the ships have turned around, he was so relieved. At this point, the United States Secretary of State famously said, "We are eyeball to eyeball." And I think the other guy just blinked. This is like, you know, when you're having a staring contest with someone, who loses? The person that blinks first. So he was saying there were two enemies getting closer and closer and closer and closer, and the United States didn't give up, and the Soviets had to go back. On October 26th, so that's 2 more days, Khrushchev sends Kennedy a telegram saying, I promise to remove the missiles that are already in Cuba if you promise to not invade. But before Kennedy could respond, and it doesn't literally mean like he wasn't able to. You can sit down and send a telegram at any time. But this is like, there's nuclear war about to happen. He wants to think, he wants to process, he wants to have all these meetings with his ex-com to decide, what should I say? How should I respond? Well, while they were having all those meetings and before he responded, Khrushchev sent another telegram saying, oh, disregard that last one. I will remove the missiles from Cuba if the United States removes their missiles from Turkey. It's like upping the stakes. On the same day that Khrushchev sent that, an American spy plane, they call them U-2s, an American U-2 plane was shot down over Cuba. So like American spies are going over Cuba to do their checking out thing, but Cuba shot it down. Well, some people in America called this an act of war and were demanding Kennedy go to war with Cuba. Those people, they have a nickname and they're called hawks. Anyone who is like this warmonger, war hungry, wants to go to war all the time, that's a hawk. And other people did not want a war because, hey, nuclear assured destruction. They wanted to find other solutions. Come on, we can talk this out. Those people were called doves. Kennedy refused to go to war. He did not want to start a nuclear war. He refused to give in to the hawks, even though they were really, really putting serious pressure on him to go to war. He refused to give in to them and remained a dove. All right, the day after that, Kennedy decided to completely ignore the second telegram. Like, just pretend like he didn't see it. The one that said that they have to remove, America has to remove the nuclear missiles from Turkey. Yeah, he just ignored that one. And he agreed to Khrushchev's first telegram, which was, if you remove the missiles, I promise I won't invade you. And Khrushchev agreed. He said, okay, cool. No nuclear war. I'll remove the missiles. Now, we now know, remember, because we're studying history, we're looking back. So we have all the facts now. We know that Kennedy's brother, Robert, had met the Soviet ambassador in Washington, D.C. the day before on the 27th, and they were trying to make peace arrangements. Like, how can we work this out? And in their meeting, Robert had agreed to take the missiles out of Turkey. But the American government, being the American government, kept that completely secret, didn't tell anyone that they had made, that Robert Kennedy had made this deal. So, what were the consequences of the Cuban Missile Crisis? Oh my goodness, brinkmanship is scary. Brinkmanship, oh, that's a typo there, clearly. The R should be lowercase. Anyway, brinkmanship is when you're on the brink of war. Think of, when you are so angry and you're in a bad mood. And the only thing, if someone just looks at you the wrong way, you're going to explode. Well, that is, you are on the brink of exploding. You are on the brink of screaming. Well, the whole world was on the brink of nuclear war. And people being people gave that feeling a word, and it's called brinkmanship. And the whole freaking world realized that brinkmanship is not a place we want to be. Both leaders, Khrushchev and Kennedy, in 1963, agreed to, like, how are we going to lower these tensions? And one way was they set up a direct line between Washington, D.C. and Moscow, known as the hot line. Now, most people I know, when you think of a direct line, you think of a phone. Like he just picked up his phone and called straight from DC to Moscow. Number one, there were no cell phones in 1963. It would have been a landline phone sitting on the desk. But number two, it wasn't that at all. It was not a phone. It was a telegram line. They could straight from Kennedy's office, he could send a telegram to Khrushchev, and Khrushchev could send a telegram straight to Kennedy. 5 years later, they agreed to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. What does that mean, Mrs. Givens? That sounds crazy. Okay. Proliferation is to spread, like bunny rabbits reproduce like crazy. Oh my goodness, if you have 2 rabbits, in 3 months you have 8 rabbits, and in 3 more months you have 64 rabbits, and in 3 more months you have 250 rabbits, because they're all proliferating so much, spreading. So, and we're going to not proliferate nuclear weapons. This is the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Both sides, the Americans and the Soviets, signed it, and the Brits, the United Kingdom, also signed it. They promised to stop the spread of nuclear weapons, and they promised they would not give any the plans. Like, they're not going to go and tell Slovakia how to make nuclear weapons. They promised they wouldn't do that. That was in 1968, the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. All right. Now, oh, wait, I'm not, yeah, sure. This slide is in the wrong place, but let's talk about it anyway. Okay, this guy should be so famous. Vasily Alexandrovich Arkhipov. This guy is so cool to learn about. So it's right in the middle of the nuclear missile crisis, the Cuban Missile Crisis. Everybody is stressed out. Everybody is tense. And this guy was a soldier, like a Marine, on a Soviet submarine loaded with nuclear weapons. He's on his way to Cuba, and the United States, like, they're underwater here. The United States is sitting up here in ships on the top of the water, and they're dropping little shock things that are supposed to hit the submarine, not hurt it, just like a tap on your head, just tap the submarine to try to get them to come up so they can talk. But on this submarine, radio communications have been lost. The people that are on this sub, they have no idea what is going on in the world. All they know is things are really, really tense. They might be about to go to war, and they're sending nuclear weapons to Cuba. And all of a sudden, there are these things hitting their submarine. They think they're being attacked. The people in the submarine, in the Soviet submarine with nuclear weapons, think they are being attacked by the Americans. Now, they had a rule that is a really good rule. Before you can launch a nuclear weapon, the top 3 commanding officers on the submarine must all agree. Yes, I want to send this. I want to start a nuclear war. Yes, I want to start a nuclear war. Yes, I want to start a nuclear war. On this submarine, Soviet submarine, they thought they were being attacked by the Americans. The top 2 commanding officers both agreed to launch a nuclear warhead. The 3rd guy, Vasily Alexandrovich Arkhipov, refused. He refused to agree to launching the weapon. The radio communications were out. They didn't know what was going on, and he wouldn't do it. And so I believe it is very, very important to know this man's name. He saved the world from a nuclear war, mutually assured destruction. If they had sent that warhead over, you know America would have responded. All right. Consequences of the Cuban Missile Crisis, Part 2. So it's kind of funny to think about, but in some ways, because the world came so close to a nuclear war, the world was actually a safer place now. The superpowers realized brinkmanship was no place to be. And so they actively worked on making their relations better. Kennedy looked way stronger now and became really popular. Khrushchev couldn't bully him anymore. He stood up to the hawks, wouldn't let them bully him, and he became really madly popular. Kennedy was really, really popular. He was so popular because that deal to remove the missiles from Turkey was still a secret. Nobody knew he had made that deal. And Khrushchev appeared weak. When he gave the order for the ships to turn around, the Soviets saw that as weakness, and they were humiliated. The Soviet people were feeling humiliated by this withdrawal. In fact, he became so unpopular from the Cuban Missile Crisis. It's one of, or maybe the main reason that he was voted out of power in 1964. And we're finished. Okay, I want you all to, do what we always do. Take your notes and stuff, and I'll see you next time.